Good day and welcome to Behind the Story with America Media. I'm Ricardo da Silva, Jesuit priest and associate editor. Pope Francis will visit the peoples of the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan from January 31st through February 5th for his 40th apostolic visit abroad. The Democratic Republic of Congo will be the first stop on his visit to the African continent, where the Pope will remain until February 3rd. It is a country rich in mineral wealth and rife with political, tribal, and even interreligious conflicts. Pope Francis has said that he is on a mission of peace to these African nations. The D.R.C. reached independence in 1960, although it has continued to be embroiled in politically driven conflicts. It is also a majority Catholic country, with 45 million Catholics, about 50% of the total population, making it the largest Catholic community in Africa. Its people are hungering for the hope that the first papal visit in 38 years will bring them as a nation and a church. Before we get to our conversation, please subscribe to our channel. Just hit the red button below. Joining me on Behind the Story is Toussaint Kafarhire, a Jesuit priest, political analyst, and the director of Centre Europe, a center for research and formation in Lubumbashi, a city on the country's southeastern tip. Toussaint, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Thank you.
It's great to have you on Behind the Story. This visit of Pope Francis was postponed last July when Pope Francis could no longer travel because of the problems he was having with his knee, which now seem to be much improved, although he is in a wheelchair. How did it come about? What is this visit to the Democratic Republic of Congo? What does it mean for the people? What does it mean for Pope Francis?
Thank you very much for that question, Ricardo. Indeed, in early July, the Congolese people and South Sudanese people and the entire continent of Africa, I would say, was very eager to receive Pope Francis. And I can tell you the amount of disappointment that they felt when the visit got cancelled. It was no one's fault. The Pope was not feeling well. I mean, he had the knee problem. The medical doctor advised him not to travel at that point. But Ricardo, a couple of weeks later, maybe 3 weeks later, Pope Francis was able to make a trip to Canada, where he went, met with the indigenous community, apologized for all the wrongs that the church did in the past to the community. And at that point, I believe in Africa, people started feeling bad, I would say. You know, they felt as if they were not considered. They felt as, because Africa has always been at the bottom of, the world interests, that Pope Francis just cancelled that trip, but it was not that the reason. So in November, on the 1st of November, on the feast of all the saints, Pope Francis held a synodal conversation with the youth from Catholic universities across the continent of Africa. And I can remember very clearly the question that a Congolese young lady put to Pope Francis directly. And she asked Pope Francis, teasing him, I guess, "Holy Father, can you tell us whether you were scared by all the wars and conflict and violence going on in the Congo that made you cancel your trip?" And she added, saying that, people from different religions around us are the ones actually teasing the Catholics that their Pope is coward. And Pope Francis, of course, laughed about it. But he said, "I have recovered. I am strong enough. I'm still in wheelchair, but I promise I will be coming by the end of January." So I know the eagerness, the joy, the preparedness that people have put in, to just welcome this moment and live through it, because it's a momentum, I would say. It's such a unique moment. You said in, I don't remember when was the last visit of a Pope to Africa. I think almost 40 years ago.
Yeah, 38 years ago, Pope John Paul II.
38 years ago, even. Yeah.
Do you remember that trip? Were you there? You must have been a young boy then.
I was very young. I was 12 years old, but everybody can still keep the memory of the even childhood, because when a pop come to a country like this, it was just a moment of like a jubilee, I would say, as we read it in the Bible.
Hmm.
So we're hoping that this one also will be another jubilee for the Congolese people.
So let's talk about this one. What are the hopes? What is the significance of this visit? Tell me what the emotion and feeling is like on the streets.
Well, I started by reminding you of the disappointment we felt at the beginning. And now the disappointment is getting vindicated, I would say,
Hmm.
because Pope Francis is holding his word, and he is not that well. I mean, he's an old man of 86 years old. But the sooner he recovered from the injury, in the knee, he was on the way. He was like a pilgrim, like St. Ignatius of Loyola himself, going on a pilgrimage to the peripheries. And I think that is a concept that is very, very much liked by Pope Francis. He's talking about the peripheries. I believe the people are very, very overjoyed. People are waiting for this moment to just be in the presence of the Holy Father. It is in itself a message. It is, the Pope may not even speak words, just his being there is a reminder that this is what the gospel is supposed to be. So we are hopeful, we are joyful, we are excited, we are just waiting for this moment to happen, to be able to pray together with the head of the Catholic Church, who is our father in faith. And in that respect, in that regard, we believe really there is no other consolation the people in the Congo or in Africa could expect or look for. So it is really a moment that we want to live in spirituality, spiritually and humanly.
We hear this over and over how Pope Francis, more than anything, is a pope of gestures, right? And he is going into the situation in the D.R.C. for a very particular reason. There are active conflicts in the country. We know he sent a message, a telegram, to the evangelical churches not long ago when there was a bombing in one of the churches just some weeks ago, and he has said that he is with the people there. Give me a sense of what is going on the ground. What is this need that Pope Francis is coming to respond to? What are the conflicts?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Ricardo. Pope Francis, if you look at most of his trips, is not someone who is going to the places of power and wealth and luxury. Actually, when I think about the Pope, one thing that comes strongly to my mind is that question which Jesus put to the crowd, after the visit of the disciple of John the Baptist. And Jesus looks at the crowd and asks them, "What did you go out into the desert, into the wilderness to see? A reed swaying in the wind? A man dressed in a fine linen?" If you remember, chapter
Hmm.
7 of the Gospel of Luke. So Pope Francis is not coming to this wilderness of the human rights, of the suffering of people, to just shake the hand of head of state. And no, Pope Francis is coming to this existential periphery, as I put it before, to express the closeness of God and the compassion of God for the people who have suffered so much.
Hmm.
And the choice of South Sudan and the choice of the D.R.C. is very meaningful. Let me talk about the D.R.C. briefly, very briefly. The D.R.C. is a country that really, the entire history, I would say, has been fraught with a lot of violence, lot of silences also, because people want to silence things that are not very happy to be seen or to be known. From colonization to this day, I would say, Congolese people have suffered a huge deal, a great deal, because of the wealth of the country. And even now, as Pope Francis is coming to express that closeness, the compassion of God, Pope Francis is very much aware that the problem is not the Congolese people, who are very hospitable people. They're very loving people. Their culture is just amazing, But the powers of the world that have this, how do I put this? Like the covet, if you will, the covet, the wealth of the Congo. They come to fight. They want to keep a very weak government in the Congo so that they can continue to get the advantages of timber, coltan, gold, all the minerals, even the soil. So when you get to the Congo nowadays, you'll just be appalled by the way that the rich handful group of rich people have, monopolized the land, the wealth, almost everything at the expense of the poor. And Pope Francis is coming to remind us that what we need is love, human rights, social justice, right distribution, and just the dignity for which every single human being was created.
So these are covetous international powers, right, that have come to plunder the country of its mineral wealth. Among those, many developing nations, right? I mean, it has a troubled history, especially where I am now. I mean, a troubled history with the United States.
Yeah, it is unfortunate that we have to say it. The United States and most of these powerful countries, developed countries, as you call them, they speak one thing and they do the opposite. So apparently it is politics. They call it politics. They call it realism. And when you read Fratelli Tutti, I think it is a powerful message that the Pope is getting out there, reminding politicians that really politics is not about lying to people or exploiting the people that we are supposed to serve. And Pope Francis is reminding us that actually the young people or the younger generation of people are getting disinterested completely in politics because of those corrupted, actions or acts, because of the fraud, because of everything that goes against the common good. And Pope Francis is reminding us that we need that conversion to come back to do the right politics. So, yeah, the US, France, many other powerful countries, just like in the time of the Cold War, they would use African hands or African countries to destabilize others so that they can continue to profit and benefit from the wealth of these countries. But again, when we say this, we are lumping, things. We are just overgeneralizing, I can say. We should recognize that even in the US, you do have very many good people, good politicians who are fighting for the right thing, But unfortunately, sometimes I think those interest groups that are more vocal, more powerful, are the ones that drive the politics, international politics, and they're the ones that define the agenda in international relations. And to that extent, they have been using, countries within Africa. Uganda has been there, Rwanda has been there, just to get access to those wealth without going through the proper channels. And they care less about how many people are dying, suffering, and So it is our duty to be committed to denouncing such acts and bringing really the light of the gospel to how we need to organize our communities and societies and project ourselves into the future that we really want. And this is what Pope Francis is bringing us.
Yeah, and so one of the forces, I think, which is central, and we can see it certainly very strong in the country, you have a 50% majority Catholic population. Clearly, the Catholic Church is a powerful institution within that mix. I'm sure it has been a powerful institution for evil, but also for good, right, on so many levels. Can you talk to us about the country's Catholicity? What does Catholic Congo look like?
Yeah, yes, we do have a very strong Catholic institution in the Congo. The country, I would say, for the last 30 years, if not more, has been completely destabilized. And I think it is partly, in part because of the international politics of neoliberalism, which even Pope Francis has been stigmatizing in many ways. So privatization and the death of the public service and the public sector is just felt almost everywhere. And so the Catholic Church has been one of these institutions that has come in to fill out the vacuum, I would say, of whatever the government was supposed to be doing in terms of public education, in terms of health, provision, in terms of so many other social, actions and commitments. The Catholic Church has been very, very outgoing, and we are very lucky, I would say. And we're very grateful also to have such a committed, dedicated Catholic Church. I believe most people in Africa would agree that the Conference of Catholic Bishops of the Congo is the most vocal and the strongest on the continent when it comes to matters of politics and social issues.
And the Catholic bishops certainly have played an instrumental role in the country, right? They've spoken out strongly against the corruption, the injustice, the violence, the poverty. I was reading this interview with the Apostolic Nuncio to the D.R.C., Ettore Balestrero, in which he says the Catholic Church handles almost 40% of the healthcare systems of the country. There are about 6 million children educated in Catholic institutions from kindergarten through high school. The Catholic Church is responsible for the electoral observance missions and one of the most trusted institutions to ensure that democracy is being processed in these elections.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I remember in the early 70s, maybe I was not even born yet, but we had a powerful cardinal who got himself in trouble with Mobutu when Mobutu, we spoke a little bit about Mobutu, was beginning to, place himself at the center of almost everything, to be worshipped almost as a savior or almost as a god. And the church said, no, you can't be God, because we only have one Savior, Jesus Christ, and we only have one God. So the cardinal was exiled and wanted to spend some years at the Vatican. I mentioned Bishop Muzihirwa Christopher in the early 80s, who was extremely outspoken, a Jesuit, who was killed actually at the beginning of all the wars in 1996. Most people look at him as the African Romero, Monsignor Romero, because of his dedication and commitment to the dignity of every single human being, regardless of ethnic background, social status, whatever you want to call it. And as you mentioned about the Catholic Church and the Conference of Catholic Bishops in the Congo, I believe it is within that tradition that they place themselves, and they want to continue to speak to every single social issue that has been disfiguring and distorting, that image which everyone inherited from creation. It is part of the deposit of the Christian teaching, the Catholic social doctrine or teaching that we were made into the image and likeness of God. And it is that sacredness of every human being that, drive, I would say, the political or the social commitment of the church within the continent, but specifically in the Congo. So you are right. The Catholic bishops in the Congo have been very present, accompanying the democratization process from the early 90s. Monsengo actually was the president of that transition period. We called it Conférence Nationale Souveraine. And then he continued to lead, as almost a spiritual father or the political class, a political group. Who refer to them as one wise man. In Africa, wisdom is something very, very important. And we want to go to the elders to listen to what kind of wisdom they can bring to us so that we can live together. And bishops actually play that role within our communities, within our society, as elders with wisdom who can help us overcome some of these political divides, try to get right, some of these social injustices, and just build up that kingdom of heaven that we so much long to see come or happen in our midst. Yes,
It's really
indeed, the churches. Yeah.
it's really refreshing to hear that. You know, we so often we hear about bishops being caught in scandal, cardinals facing charges. We seldom hear the good work that is being done by so many bishops and church officials, and in a country like the D.R.C., where that is so important, where it needs to be such a vocal and strong presence. I wonder if we can look to Pope Francis's visit a little more concretely. Given all this history, given the political history, given the church's history, and especially the history of the bishops and their fight for social justice, what do you think Pope Francis's message needs to be? Or at least if you were advising Pope Francis, what would you say to him he needs to bring when he comes to the D.R.C. next week?
Wow, that is a tough question. What can I advise to someone who is wiser than me? But anyway, let me try to say something. There is a picture, there's an image of the DRC that is widespread. It comes from the past, and we keep repeating it and reproducing it through discourse and through action as well, like what happened recently. But I believe even the bombing to which you referred earlier that happened in the Congo got a huge coverage than any bombing, let's say, that may happen in south side of Chicago. And it sounds worse because it is happening in Africa among Africans, for whom many people around the world still bear that kind of prejudice, as if Africa was a savage place inhabited by savages and who know only how to butcher and kill each other and so on and so forth. So whatever is going on in the Congo, honestly, I am not going to normalize it. It is not normal at all because it is for mere stones, that people can still get access to without so much violence. And we need strong, So if I had to expect any words of wisdom from Pope Francis, is to continue to be outspoken as the church has to be, as he has always been, and speak truth to the powers. The people in Africa are not at the neck of each other, but most of the time, it is politicians who instrumentalize their background, their communities, ethnic communities, to just get access to that, power, to that wealth, and so many other things. So I believe what we really need the most now in Africa is to set the record right and speak the truth. The truth has been, I don't want to say jeopardized, but I want to say, in French, we have a concept that is bradé. Bradé is like sold very cheap, So I remember actually from the conversation we had before with the Pope online with the youth, some young people were telling Pope Francis, can you help us at least have references in our faith so that we know what stand to take when people from other religions ask us questions about this issue or that issue. The issue could be that of homosexuality. The issue could be that of democracy. The issue could be any kind of social issue. Tell us what is the right Catholic teaching. And so I believe even when we are progressive, as we have to be, because the world is always on the move, it's changing, we need to have those truths which we cannot sell so cheap, and for which we are ready to die as we have had martyrs. And that truth needs to be spoken to politicians who want to relativize everything. Human life has become relative to wealth and power, and we don't need any of that. We need to put the human person at the center of communities, of societies, of structures, of institutions, of wealth, of work, of everything we do. We are doing it so that human beings can be human beings again. And so we want Pope Francis to remind us of those truths that no one can change, no matter where you are, the color of your skin, the amount of education you have acquired, the wealth that you have accumulated, that human being is a human being and deserves respect unconditionally. So that's one thing I hope to hear from Pope Francis.
I'm remembering that one of the ways in which Pope Francis, and I think I'm right about this, but one of the ways in which we often hear Pope Francis refer to Africa is he says Africa is the heart of Catholicism, right? It has joy. There's a significant joy. And so what is that, as an African myself, but what is the joy amid the strife?
There is so much hope in Africa, despite every single challenge that people are going through. And it gives you a pause and you wonder, how can you explain this paradox? Where is this joy coming from? How can these people still be so human or so humane? I don't know how to put this.
Maybe both.
Despite every violence, they have both, right? Yes, exactly. But I believe, first of all, we have to agree that the quality of faith among our people is something we cannot take away from them. Last year, Pope Francis sent a group of theologians from across the world to the existential peripheries. And Pope Francis reminded these theologians that you are going to listen to people. You are not going there with the amount of knowledge that you have acquired in universities and degrees. You need to go to these people and listen to how God can surprise you through their life stories.
So this is the Synod on Synodality, right? I mean, you're referring to the Synod on Synodality.
This is the Synod.
Pope Francis has invited across the world feedback on what the church needs. Maybe my question to you is, what was that feedback, right? We know we've heard one of the syntheses of the report, one of the syntheses from the Synod says that the role of women is central, right? We really need to talk about questions surrounding women, surrounding sexuality in the church. What are you hearing from the people in the D.R.C?
So I was very, very lucky and fortunate to be a part of this process as a theologian, going to the peripheries, existential peripheries, and listening to people. I wanted to link this maybe to the previous question that you raised, because I met some of the women who had been victims of rapes in the wars in the D.R.C. And I was just astounded to see the amount of joy that transpired from their faces when I told them that I am coming on behalf of Pope Francis to listen to you. What message do you have for Pope Francis? What can I go and tell Pope Francis? And one lady who was in her 70s, whose story I can't even start telling you, it is just a story of tears and blood. She smiled and she said, "Go tell Pope Francis we're so grateful that he still remembers us, that he can still think about us." This was in May 2022. And she said, "Tell Pope Francis in July 2022, we shall be there to welcome him." And this lady was smiling, and it was a smile that was not fake. That was not for the media or for publicity or for the photo no. It was a smile springing from the bottom of her heart. And I asked her actually the question, how can you be so happy despite everything that happened to you? And she said, faith. She said, the community around me, what Pope Francis has referred to, and everybody else around us are talking about the Ubuntu. It's very well coming from South Africa. Monsignor Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela, and many theologians are now talking about the Ubuntu.
I am, because we are.
My capacity to be a human person. Exactly. I am because of that community that surrounds me. And I say to myself, this is where sometimes when the West is trying to read Africa, the West gets it wrong because we have measurements of economics or I don't know of politics in the West that sometimes do not fit within the African context, culture, histories, but that are applied anyway blindly, and you want to judge, Africa based on that, benchmark of the West. The Ubuntu economy, the Ubuntu politics, the Ubuntu just way of organizing is something that is very powerful, giving hope to those members of the community, of the family, of the society, of the church, whose lives otherwise would be meaningless if it were not for the love and hope that we share together. So maybe I took you a little bit back to the older question. Please feel free to
That's
come back
fine.
to
I'm going to
the
bring you
next.
back to my question around, which is part of what you've spoken about right now. But really back to the synod. What are you hearing? What are the concrete issues? Perhaps, it would be good to hear, because we often hear that women in Africa aren't speaking up. Gay people in Africa aren't speaking up, right? And yet we're getting this from the synthesis document in the synod saying that across the world, people are speaking up, women and the LGBT community. So I want to hear, what are the issues that you've heard coming from the D.R.C.?
Thank you. Among the issues that I heard from the D.R.C, I think we are still very strongly a hierarchical church. The church is still a very strong, rigid institution where power is distributed, of course, among the male, bishops and priests. And this is something that many people believe we should speak to. Because sometimes Africans want to bring in the cultural perspectives of understanding power, authority, the father figure, and so on and so forth. But the world is really on the move. And it is because of those rigidities of power that many other abuses of power, I know that African theologians are actually looking into spiritual abuses, sexual abuses that we're not talking about. Maybe, people are still very shy to talk about the gay issue, although the gay community still exists. I mean, there are gay Africans who are out there, and just invisible people, not recognized people. I was teaching in Nairobi at Hekima College a few years ago, and I had a class on African cultures and conflicts. And I remember discussing some of these issues from our cultural backgrounds with my MA students. And the way they just handled the issue of gayness or homosexuality in Africa was very, very dismissive. But it's part of what maybe we need to listen to, because synodality is about listening. We need to be prophetic enough not to listen to ourselves and our fears, right? But to listen to really what Pope Francis would call the promptings of the Holy Spirit. Where is God calling us in today's world, culture, to be witnesses to the gospel? I was listening to the Pope recently, and he was saying it is not right to mistreat people simply because they are gay, because it is not a crime to be a gay person. Mm-hmm. But in Africa, I think we are lagging behind because people will tell you we have more pressing issues than those of sex, sexuality, and whatever. So it looks like a sexy topic, like a luxury, topic. So they say hunger and a luxury topic.
So am I right in this? From what I'm hearing you say, you're saying that people are aware that the church has a hierarchical nature, that the church has systems which contribute towards violence in many ways, systems of violence, and they are speaking out. They are saying, it's enough. We need to revise who we are as church.
Changing a culture, Ricardo, might be very difficult because it. I mean,
But people are
The
saying
perception
that.
of the
But people
priest
are
in our
saying that.
cultures, yeah, people want to shake off the clericalism of the church, of course. It is very important. It's very urgent, I think, you know. And to do that, as you're saying, I believe actually we simply need to recognize that, the way power within the church is distributed is biased. I mean, it is skewed toward the male, figures. And so, what is the role that women or female, agents have been playing within the church? How much voice are we giving to the female body of the church? Whether it is on a Sunday, service, when you all you can hear is a homily that was prepared by a man priest because he went through 3 years of theology at the seminary and comes to speak with that power which the church vested in him. You understand that some women might not be comfortable. I
Mm-hmm.
remember, I will say this very quickly, a lady who reminded us, we were going through the Arupe month before ordination, and this lady said, "Fathers, when you are preparing your homilies, please do not insult our intelligence,
Mm.
because in the audience, you have many women who came with a hunger, the thirst for the word of God, and they really want you to prepare rightly and properly your homilies. But do not come to tell us rubbish," she said, "simply because you have that stole around your neck and because you have been ordained. Remember, there are many female theologians now who know better than you, who were your professors, and don't just abuse your power to tell us anything." I found it very deep and very powerful.
Mm.
And so women are expecting to see some changes begin to happen, to have spaces open for discussion, for conversation, for rethinking the kind of communities that we want to build as Catholic Church in Africa. Authentically African, authentically, Catholic.
We know that Pope Francis is going to meet with priests and religious while he is in Kinshasa. But he keeps speaking these words of anti-clericalism and really trying to create a church which is listening. So looking at the trip, he's going to be staying mainly in Kinshasa. In fact, he's going to be staying exclusively in Kinshasa, as I understand it. But there will be
Yeah.
victims from Goma, where he was expected to visit the eastern part of the country that's war torn. He was hoping to go there, but it seems the conflict is just too strong there, and there is concern for the safety of the people if Pope Francis goes there. He's not worried about himself going there so much as he is what his presence there might bring for the conflict there. And so we know that those women and that you spoke of earlier are going to be coming to Kinshasa. What other places in Kinshasa will Pope Francis visit that are of significance?
Okay. So Pope Francis is going to be meeting with the victims of violence and wars from Eastern Congo. I've been in touch because I worked with the Jesuit Refugee Service last year in Goma, and I met the bishop. I met my fellow brothers, priest brothers. I met actually people on the ground, as I was saying before, and I know that they are very much ready to get to Kinshasa to meet with Pope Francis. I will come back a little bit to what I said before when Pope Francis, talked with the youth in November last year. Pope Francis reminded the lady from the Congo who raised the question. He said, "Oh, I am very, very happy you asked that question because you used the word compassion of God." The question was, when are you coming back to express that compassion of God to our people, to those women who were raped, victims, and Pope Francis went on and on and on to talk about the compassion. So we are sure Pope Francis is coming to express that compassion to this group of people. But after that, Pope Francis is talking also to the youth and the catechist. It means what? It means Pope Francis sees the hope of this vibrant church, but also growing church within the youth and the catechists. So if changes have to happen, it is what kind of message, what kind of legacy of faith are we handing down to the younger people, younger generation? But at the same time, what is the content that we are putting in our catechism today? So Pope Francis is going to talk to these groups to say it is very important the work that you're doing, the torch, the light actually that you are bearing, you are carrying, and we need to keep going, running with that forward, right? After that only is when Pope Francis is going to meet maybe with the priests and religious men and women to continue discussing. And it will be the 2nd of February, which is the feast actually of religious life, the feast of the light, la Chandeleur, as we say in French.
Candlemas.
So on that, yes, exactly. So on that day, I believe Pope Francis is going to remind religious men and women, consecrated people, that we need to play that prophetic role that we are supposed to be playing, because we talked about clericalism, and clericalism is when maybe we content ourselves with the minimum, bare minimum actually, because we are covered by the institution. It is almost like that parable that Pope Francis likes to quote very often about the Good Samaritan, right? You have a priest who passes by and goes his way because he's on duty. He doesn't want to defile himself. And that clericalism style is what Pope Francis is telling us. You quit that attitude, that position. You need to regain what it means to be a prophet in today's world. There are many issues and many challenges. There are many expectations from people, and you need to be out there with the people of God without fear. The spirit we received is not a spirit of fear, St. Paul would say, right? But a spirit of freedom that sets us out there to profess, to proclaim Jesus. And so I believe that will be another area of Pope Francis's message to the Congolese community. But another area I really believe strongly is that of addressing the political class, the politicians. Many of them are Catholics. You said we have 45 million Catholics, half the population, meaning they come to the church every Sunday, they receive communion every Sunday. But when it comes to the sphere of acting just or acting rightly, our structures and the institutions overwhelm their willingness to do what is right. So how can they be good Christians and good politicians at the same time, good Catholics and witnesses of the gospel in places where they are working? So it is our hope that that is another area or sector where Pope Francis will be addressing, another existential periphery within the Congolese periphery. Yes.
Toussaint, our time is running out, but you spoke about light and bearing light. What is the light that you are most hoping for with this visit? In one sentence.
I see Pope Francis reviving our way of being Christians in the 21st century. We're coming from a past that is heavy. We're going to a future that is lighter, but with Christ, the light of Christ. Because Pope Francis is a Jesuit, and I love when Pedro Arope tries to define a Jesuit, and he says it is just looking at Christ and trying to imitate Christ. So the light is, how can we begin to be Christ to one another again? So that is the light, the hope that I hope. Yeah.
Toussaint, it's been a joy. Such a privilege to speak to you ahead of the visit. I know you are going to take some young people. You're going to be traveling to Kinshasa yourself later in the week, and you're going to introduce many of these young people who met with the Pope at this university audience last year. You're going to take them to meet with the Pope in person this time. And so we wish you well, and hopefully we'll be able to connect with you again upon return. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. God bless. Thank you for this moment.
Thank you. God bless you. Thank you for joining us on Behind the Story. For complete coverage of the Pope's visit to D.R.C. and South Sudan, visit americamagazine.org. And if you like the video, the best way to support our work is through a digital subscription to America at americamagazine.org/subscribe. Thank you.